Billy the Liquor Guy here. The story you're about to hear, under too long, is the story of bombs, drugs, untaxed alcohol, terrorism, and the undercover agents who brought it all down. Thanks for being here. Episode 10. In this episode, the past comes back with a vengeance. From a deadly encounter on the BQE to $1 million showdown, every move was a fight for survival. With enemies tightening the noose and betrayal lurking close, the risks had never been higher. There was no turning back now. Let's dive in.
Chapter 37. Coward on the BQE. While the cases were wrapped up, there was one last matter at hand. Sunshine. The drug task force had arrived at her brothel at 9 a.m., the same time we begun our takedowns at the warehouse, and arrested her, her girls, and a few men who happened to be inside. She says she won't talk unless you come down to the station and admit you were an undercover the whole time you were with her, the detective said over the phone. There was no way I wanted to face this, but Stanton and the guys wouldn't have it any other way. You work too hard. Clear your name and get her a good deal. She saved us too many times, Billy. It took every bit of courage I had to walk into that station and face the woman who sat waiting for me, her wrists handcuffed and attached to the table. I had to give the woman in front of me a double take as she no longer resembled the woman I'd spent the past year doing business with. This woman looked worn. Her afro, which turned out to be a wig, was gone, revealing the little stumps of regrowth on her shaved head. Along with her bald head was her missing eyelashes, which were apparently fake as well. Who knew fake eyelashes could make such a difference? Her eyes looked minuscule and drawn out, which made her somewhat easier to talk to. It was as if the woman I'd spent time doing business with and the strange, bald woman in front of me were two different people. Any emotion or trepidation I'd felt walking in fell to the wayside with one glance. You lied to me this whole time, she cried, as I took a seat across from her. I know, and I'm sorry, I said, trying to find sunshine in the woman across from me. I really did like you as a person. I think you're a beautiful female who's bright and great at business. It just wasn't a business that you should have been doing. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought you were the real deal. You promised me a white picket fence, a house, and a family. In another time, another life, that could have been, I said. Sunshine's shoulders shook as she cried harder. Snot began to gather at the tip of her nose. They've got a deal for you, I said. Have you considered it? Sunshine nodded her head up and down, causing the snot to run down her mouth and chin. I want you to take it, Sunshine. You're someone very special to us. You'll help save our case. Hell, you helped save our lives, twice. It's our turn to take care of you. What about my business and everything else? It's all gone? You've taken that from me. We're giving you the chance to start something better. I know you can do that. You're too smart not to. Take the deal, Sunshine. You'll be out in under 2 years. That's plenty of time to plan your next steps. Figure out what you can do when you get out. Is that all you got to say, Silver? Sunshine asked. White, salty streaks smeared her face. I came to make sure you talked. Give them what they want. You're not who they're looking for. You're only small potatoes. If that's all you have to say, then you can go. I've heard what I needed. I sat for a minute waiting to see if there was anything left to debate. Stay safe in there, Sunshine, I said as I stood up from my seat. If you need anything, or if you decide you want to talk, you have our number. Sunshine refused to look at me as I exited the room. By the second day, I learned that she'd taken the deal and given up everyone, along with a statement that showed my innocence in the bathroom with her. Her case was closed. She was out in 16 months based on good behavior. I never heard much about her whereabouts once she finished her time. I only hoped the college classes she reportedly taken while in prison had served the purpose and granted her a degree once she escaped the confines of the cement walls. During my dealings with Sunshine, Stanton had dealings of his own. The PATB began putting pressure on him to create a new sting in Virginia. The FBI and Terrorism Task Force wanted exclusive use of Saeed, who'd been spending his days working counter-surveillance with us for their current investigations, and requests from hundreds of other officers who want to be included in further undercover stings began piling up. Yet, while everyone wanted some sort of in now that our takedowns were all over the news, the ivory tower became lackadaisical. When Stanton succumbed to the request and agreed to take our unit to Virginia, the ivory tower showed its so-called support with a signed refusal for new undercover vehicles. For them, it was a waste of money. All our bad guys had been arrested, so there wasn't a need to revamp everything because there wasn't anyone to hide from. For Stan, it was a matter of protection. What if someone from our past did remember us by the vehicles we drove? What if the bad guys were giving up intel in jail, seeking out our whereabouts? No matter how Stan fought for our protection, the ivory tower could not be swayed. Never one to wait or play by the rules, Stan went ahead and set up a warehouse in Dahlgreen, Virginia, purchased cigarettes with the state's allowance, and took out an ad in the local Arabic newspaper. Once it was all set, he reached out to the local police department and set up the same RIP principles we use with the Yonkers Police Department. The only change we had this time, besides a lack of support from the Ivory Tower, was Saeed's absence. The recent attention from the FBI and other agencies had made Saeed feel at risk. He had been speaking to Stan at odd times throughout the days, leading to our new sting. Calls would come through at 2 a.m., his voice wiry and shaky on the other end. He'd been woken to strange noises outside his home. He'd sworn people were outside, ready to bash down his door and take him and his family into government custody. When that didn't happen, he'd called, concerned about the random phone calls that were coming into his home or the strange cars that were parked across the street watching his children play on the front stoop. But the final frantic call came through one day before our departure to Virginia, when 2 agents cornered him on the street, demanded his help, and threatened his family's U.S. residency. According to a friend, Saeed hung up with Stanton, packed his family up, and fled to Africa in the middle of the night. Stanton had no knowledge of where he had gone or how he'd get in contact with him. Yet Stanton would spend the next 2 years facing criminal accusations and an open investigation with the state for aiding Saeed in his escape from the U.S. The case would eventually be pulled out of the system due to lack of evidence. It was a rightful win for Stan, but a festering loss for the state and one woman in particular. Without Saeed, Stan had to bring in another CI. This one had helped undercovers imprison a terrorist set to conduct a mass shooting at a local high school. He was professional enough, but could never really take the place of Saeed. However, with a new CI on our side, it left me room to negotiate bringing Chaz and Brahim, my former co-workers, onto the detail too. Within the first week, we acquired a dozen customers, just as we expected, along with 2 successful RIP cases with the local police. But instead of purchasing more cigarettes with extra income, Stanton used the money to purchase new vehicles for our unit. It was a huge middle finger to the state, and one they didn't take too kindly. Over the first 2 months, our caseloads had become so standard that I took furniture from my house and brought it to our warehouse so everyone could be comfortable on the job. While our comfort continued, Stan's discomfort with the state began to grow. The newly appointed Inspector General began to ask questions, thanks to Stanton's middle finger. The inspector had been notorious for investigating and shutting down operations that had embezzled money. Her name and wide-eyed stare spread across New York headlines like a California wildfire. She was boasting her success, and now Stanton and our unit were on her radar. The inspector began looking into our numbers, writing Stanton about how much or how little we had in our account. She rechecked what the state and the accountants received and attempted to find a missing balance. The money infringement and questions made Stanton's blood pressure rise. His temperament caught a few people off guard every now and again. But when it came to our detail, he was focused as ever. So when a sister agency outside New York City requested assistance with a case per the state's recommendations, Stanton proudly sent me to clear the way. The state allotted me 2 days off the Virginia detail to help the agency track a supplier. When I arrived, the unit informed me of their lead, a rusty white van. With trackers set up and a rotating surveillance crew, the team had monitored the van as it crossed the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania state lines several times a week. They had video surveillance of the van entering verified warehouses responsible for the sale of untagged cigarettes, both in and out of the area, as well as footage of cigarettes being loaded into the van. I almost felt bad telling the guy that their surveillance didn't show a kingpin of an operation as they believed. They merely discovered a driver. Disappointment showed on every face in the room. A few guys questioned my conclusion, and one pompous investigator challenged every detail I explained to the team. The room quickly heated up. The pompous investigator challenged the other investigators for listening to me, Another investigator announced he wanted to quit, and others began arguing with everyone his emotions and exhaustion from a case they thought they were about to crack come bearing down. I sat quietly, examining their footage until I noticed something of significance. They followed the driver to his home. "What do you know about where he lives?" I interjected over the shouting. The room began to quiet as the heated investigators walked over to check out what I pulled up. "As far as we can tell, there seems to be 6 children in the house, along with a wife and a grandmother," the lead officer explained, leaning into the screen. "Do the wife or grandmother leave during the day?" I questioned. "Do they work?" "No. The woman stayed cramped inside the apartment," the pompous investigator sneered. "They only come out to shop at the corner market and get the kids from the school bus." "He'll talk then," I informed the team. "Your work wasn't all in vain. You have something big here." They all looked at me warily. "If there are 6 children in that house and 2 women who don't leave, then he's the only one bringing in the salary," I explained. "A family of 9 relying on one income can't afford to lose it. You put that threat on the table and he'll tell you everything you need to know. He's your bait for the bad guy." The look of gloom across the team's face began to melt. Smiles spread as they grabbed pens and began jotting down notes. "We wait for the van to cross state lines tomorrow with product in hand and take him down," I announced. "Your case should have a name by afternoon and be closed within 24 hours if all goes right." The team was eager to get started. We mapped a plan. The pompous investigator and I would wait for the van to cross the Long Island Expressway after his first pickup and follow him to his next destination in Brooklyn, where we'd take him down. Everyone nodded in approval except for Pompous, who made it obvious that he wasn't thrilled to be riding with me. He wasn't exactly the guy I wanted to be beside when catching a criminal lead, either, but part of me wanted to break his balls. Having to sit with me in a car for a number of hours when I knew he disliked me seemed like the best way to do that. After all, if I was there to help their unit get a pat on the back, I should be able to have a little enjoyment too, I thought. The next morning, I pulled myself into the passenger seat, pushed my seat back, and slurped my morning coffee. I commented on Pompous driving, offered him lane directions, and changed the radio stations. For 3 hours, we sat along the LIE waiting for the van to approach. Pompous wasn't shy of letting out a giant sigh of relief and a loud "thank God" when the word of the van's movement came across the wire. I smiled, knowing I got under his skin as much as I intended, as we waited for the van to get closer. In time with the surveillance crew, we pulled onto the LIE and kept our speed to a medium crawl until the white van caught up with us. It was 11 p.m. and traffic was heavy with stop-and-go madness. Pompous remained 2 cars behind the van, just like he'd been instructed at the driving school. While we followed the van from the LIE to the BQE, it took everything I had to not jump into the driver's seat and take control. As we passed the Vadwick exit, the van began to swerve. I quickly noted the back rear tire had gone flat. "Careful," I warned Pompous. The van's warning lights went on as he attempted to push into the right lane. The location couldn't have been worse. Traffic from the airport was thick, drivers were impatient, and backup was miles away, but my instincts told me it was now or never. "Pull off behind him," I instructed Pompous. "Are you fucking kidding me?" he shouted. "I'm not pulling over here. We'll get fucking killed." "Pull over or you're going to lose your case," I advised as I picked up the radio. "Be advised, I'm going to assist the target," I said. The radio buzzed back with excitement. "No, it's too dangerous. Stand down and wait for him to get back on the road." This team was stupid, to put it kindly. They wanted our unmarked car to pull over and watch the van we were following, which would be less than 10 feet in front of us, until it was back on the road. It was idiotic. It was now or never. "Guys, we're going in," I reported, turning down the radio to ignore the chatter that came across. "Pull off behind him," I said, gesturing to the van. "This is a horrible location," Pompous whined. "We're going to get killed sitting here. If you say the word killed or die one more time, I'm going to kill you myself, you understand?" I said through clenched teeth. "Pull the fuck over." Pompous reluctantly did as he was told, flinging the car in park and leaning back, crossing his arms across his chest in defiance. I ignored the childish antics and watched as the Middle Eastern man, approximately 5'4" and 180 pounds, stepped out of his van and surveyed his wheel. Our car jerked with each car that flew past. I knew there was no chance Pussy Boy was going to get out of the car, so I opened my door and stepped out just as the man looked up. "Hey, buddy," I yelled over the traffic. "Need some help?" "This fucking tire," he yelled. gesturing to his wheel. Piece of shit. You got a spare in there? I asked, nodding to the back of its van. Yeah, I don't know, he said, running his finger through his hair. Open it up and I'll help you take a look, I said. The man naively walked to the back hatch and pulled it open. There, in the midst of all the dangerous traffic, sat a full inventory of untagged cigarettes, all piled above the spare tire. There I was, standing on the side of the BQE with the perp this unit had been following for over a week, helping him unload cases of cigarettes. It was comical. I'd fill my arms with the untaxed cases and turn to the side, flashing a smile at the lame investigator who was snapping pictures. Make me look good, asshole, I thought, as I proudly displayed the merchandise this guy was handing me. Hey, not like that, the man said, turning my body to the right of the vehicle. Somebody see you with all these cigarettes and we're going to get robbed. You're going to make the police come. Oh, sorry, I said, giving one last smile to the camera. We definitely don't want the police here. No, the man said, pulling out his tire. I stood beside the man, holding the van's lug nuts as he bent down and replaced his tire, while Pompous flung his hands up, frustrated with what I was doing. Vehicles far too close to my liking continued to fly past us. After what felt like 20 minutes, the tire was in place and the man was happily walking to the back of the vehicle beside me, slapping me on the back and shaking my hand. Thank you, he repeated. No, thank you, I said, holding his hand tightly. You just saved me a full day of work. I'm sorry? The man questioned, trying to pull his hand back. We were supposed to follow you up to your usual exit on the Outer Banks Bridge, but now that you showed me your product, we get the pleasure of resting you here. The man turned white and his eyes darted a second, which I quickly interrupted. Oh, don't run, I said, still gripping his hand. It will only make it worse. We have this whole area waiting for you. The man's eyes darted around again before settling on my partner, who was still sitting behind the wheel. Let's go, guy, I said, waiting my other hand on his shoulder. Quietly step inside the vehicle, and I might be able to help you out for being so cooperative. I think your wife and kids would like that. The man jerked his head towards me, everything suddenly sinking in. By the way, is the elderly woman in your house your mother or your wife's mother? We couldn't tell. The man's eyes filled with tears, and he lowered his head in defeat. They don't know about this. Please leave them. They know nothing. Let's walk to the car and we'll talk, I said, pushing the man forward. Fucking tire, he mumbled, tears rolling down his face. Don't be too hard on your tire, buddy, I said, opening the rear car door for him. We would have gotten you either way. I closed the door and turned my radio back on. We're going to need vehicle assistance, I radioed in. We have your guy in custody and just waiting for permission to move forward. Did you just ask for permission? An angry voice responded. Your investigator has called police to the scene. They'll pick up the suspect. You will get the truck back to the station without so much as a scratch, and that is a direct order, in case you need further explanation. Loud and clear, I replied, a bit too perky. It was obvious I overstepped my bounds. However, I felt that was justified, given the state of the idiot investigator they sent me with. If he'd gotten out of the car, he could have helped remove the cartons of cigarettes or been the one to arrest the perpetrator. I leaned into the passenger window and told Pompous I'd bring the van back while he waited for the squad car. But once I tried to get in the van, I realized I couldn't fit. The driver's seat was busted. No matter how much I tried to jam the seat back, it wouldn't budge. Reluctantly, I headed back to the car. We're going to have to switch, I said, opening the investigator's car door. My ass can't fit in. That van's a piece of shit. I'm not driving that thing, he said, trying to close his door. My face must have looked like the man in the back of the vehicles 2 minutes before. Guy, the bosses want the truck back to their location, I said. Why don't you understand? I can't drive it there. That means you need to get behind the wheel and do at least part of your job. Fuck you, I heard them over the radio. They ordered you to deliver the vehicle, not me. You think I'm stupid enough to let you sit here and take credit for this asshole's well? Fuck off. It took everything I had not to reach inside the vehicle and drag him out by his neck. Luckily for his sake, the flashing lights of the squad car loomed behind us at that exact moment. The investigator who failed to remove his scared ass from the vehicle suddenly jumped out and began walking over to the officer. I leaned against the car and watched as he eagerly shook his hand and explained the situation. This idiot was grinning ear to ear as he escorted the Middle Eastern man out of his car and into the squad car. Officer, I called out after he secured the guy, I'm going to need you to follow me back to our site. The officer walked over, looking apprehensive. I showed him the van and explained the situation. I'll call a unit in to transport it, he replied. No can do. Unfortunately, they need all eyes on this vehicle and are requesting one of us to drive it back. Since Coward Boy over here is too scared, it's going to have to be me. I said, stuffing myself into the van. My knees were up to my chest. I'm not sure this is safe, the officer responded. Neither am I, but if you can just turn your lights on and get me safely through the traffic, I'll be greatly appreciative. The officer was more than happy to comply. He walked past the investigator, whose original proud tone was now a bit more annoyed, and slid back in his car, flicking his lights on. I followed the squad car through the BQE, my knees and chest beginning to pulse, and off the highway for another 40 minutes until we reached our destination. Once the vehicle was secured and the team members were safe, I addressed the gutless investigator. I told him he was done, that he would never work with me or anybody in my unit again, and then I marched into his superior's office and had the event documented minute to minute. You might question how I handle situations or how I conduct my operations, I stated, but that's precisely why you called me out here. Sitting behind a vehicle, cowering isn't going to get you the numbers or success rate you desire, nor is it going to get the job done. Idiots like that are what damage an investigation and put a team at risk. I can't imagine the state would approve of the actions your pompous investigator just displayed. I left my signed form on his desk and walked out of the unit confident that I'd done my job well. The unit did get pretty far with the Middle Eastern man and were able to shut down the operation he worked for 6 months later. They received recognition from the governor's office and the press. However, the coward on the BQE wouldn't be there for that. He'd been moved to a smaller office downstate where he'd sit behind a safe, cushioned desk. Unfortunately, that was just the fuel he needed when the inspector threw out her most wild accusation. Our unit was missing $1 million. Chapter 38, A Million Short. We're being audited by the state, Stan said during our weekly meeting. Audited for what, I asked. They believe we're short $1 million. They're looking at everyone on the unit. Jeff and I looked at each other in disbelief. But we have accountants that can verify everything. That was true until word got out by your BQE boy. He's claiming you bragged about allotting your team extra overtime when it wasn't needed and cash that wasn't accounted for. That sleazy motherfucker, I explained. Where the hell did he come from? He's an enemy. You put him in a bad spot. He put himself in a bad spot. True, but most people who put themselves in those spots don't see it that way. Now do they? So, from this idiot's claim, they're going to open up an investigation? Seems like it, Stanton said. And that was just what they did. For 2 months, while we brought in case after case, the state dipped into our financial records, checked our personal accounts, and rechecked every second of overtime that we'd accrued. Overnight, we transformed from a unit that was breaking cases and pulling up high-crime individuals to the cast of Goodfellows. The claims tainted our names. People who once looked at us as high-profile investigators began wondering if we were what they believed us to be. Meanwhile, here we were building a large case in Virginia that left us securing access to a military base, which was 5 miles away, and forging more ties within the terrorism task force. Things on the business and investigative side were pretty good, yet just while our time in our Virginia investigation grew bigger, Russell came in with orders from the state to begin closing it down. She's heated right now, Russell said. She's calling for all operations to be closed so she can dig further. Further into what? The criminals we brought in, I yelled, the blood rising to my face. The inspector is claiming that terrorism is slowing down, Russell smoothly stated. She's convinced the state that someone can claim that the state is trying to entrap and target the Arabic community. Entrapment, I spit, words barely making it out of my mouth. She's worried that the terrorists that we have caught, the terrorists that have been validated by the state's task force, that have purchased illegal and untaxed cigarettes and sold them to profit from their criminal maneuvers, might make the state look bad? Are you fucking kidding me? I wanted to explode. The rage that began to build inside me left me feeling as if I could reach inside my stomach and rip my intestines out whole. I wanted to hurt someone, to make every fucking suit-wearing asshole hang from the ivory tower, showing the criminal negligence and bullshit that they were in fact responsible for. Billy, I'm going to need you to calm down, Russell stated. This is just temporary. Nobody is thinking clearly at the moment. Once everyone takes a step back and assesses what is happening around us and the false accusations that are being made, I think the situation can be reapproached. Reapproach nothing, I exclaimed. If they want to fuck this operation and put our names in the mud, then they can take this job and shove it up their ass. No, Billy, don't go there. That's what they want. That's one thing we agree on then, I said. You cave and give in to them, and you cave and give in to all the operations you stood for. I sat there, stewing in my anger. Think of who you are. Bust their balls. Stick around, just out of spite, if nothing else. I let the conversation with Russell linger in my mind that night. I tossed and turned, thinking of all the things I wanted to say to the inspector, how I could show everyone how wrong she was, how off she was. But all that got me was an evening without sleep and nerves that were as frazzled and frayed as I'd spent the evening tangled in electric fences. No matter how angry the team or I were, we couldn't prevent our shutdown, which was announced 2 days after Russell delivered the bad news. We'll be back, Stanton declared. The operation is not over. It's just on hold. Our unit was solemn over the next 2 days. The friendly, fun conversations died with the news of our closure, filling the space with anger, sarcasm, and loathing. Luckily for our Eagles, the one thing we had on our side was the wounded egos of everyone on the terrorism task force. To shut one of our operations down was one thing, but to suggest an entire agency's purpose and day-to-day affairs may be invalid was an entirely different offense. We shut down our operations with 13 arrests, 10 of which all had valid ties to terrorism involvement. As the FBI stepped in, quick to lap up the rewards and present these entrapped individuals to the state and press, we taped up our boxes and headed home, leaving the terrorism task force to battle the state and the inspector who'd done a good job blindsiding them all. Stanton encouraged our team to take a little respite. We'll be back, he assured us. The cases are not over. We have a world of criminal activity to tap into. Go take a moment, clear your mind, and get some rest. I have a new operation already underway. I'll reach out to you with the details, but not before I know all of you have taken a step back from this. I don't want anyone returning to the next operation with a grudge or a chip on their shoulder about the government's policies. It is what it is. Let's keep our heads. Remember what we've accomplished and go back to being normal guys for a day or two. While respite meant a family vacation and trips to Disney World for some of my coworkers, my respite was sitting poolside in Florida, tanned with information. Ronnie was known as a drug educator for special police units. He was always on the cusp of drug prices, knew what was hot, what was bad news, and most importantly, what the criminal world was lapping up. Despite the headlights and never-ending news coverage of our scandalous undertakings from the state, I arrived in Florida ready to relax and begin what will possibly be the next phase of my career. Ronnie was all smiles when I arrived. He was quick with the jokes and even quicker asking for a little side money. We'll talk money when you talk insider information, I joked. Unfortunately for Ronnie, his drug knowledge had put him in a little too close to the spotlight a few years back. He'd spent 3 years in prison as a result. Ronnie and I spent 2 days catching up, checking out Florida's coast and exchanging information. However, as most stories go, the relaxed tourist feeling that was just setting in lasted right up until my phone rang. They need you to come for questioning, Billy, Stanton replied. You can let them know that I'm on vacation, and unless those assholes are willing to pay for my flight back and forth, they can shove their questions up their ass. Ronnie shot a look at me. When are you set to come back? I have 2 more days. I'm not budging, Stanton. This is the respite you encouraged. Enjoy it like I said, but when you come back, you need to set up a meeting. They're working fast on this one. By the time I arrived at the Ivory Towers, the inspector had already met and interviewed everyone from my team, the police departments we worked with, the governor's office, and the attorney general who thankfully still had our backs. Your operation was responsible for bringing in millions of dollars into the state, Mr. William, the inspector said. You were the first operation to offset your own cost and negotiate your own needs with minimal state security. Would you find that statement to be correct? The inspector's conference room seemed sterile and cold. I couldn't tell if it was the room itself, the 8 other boring suits quietly watching as the inspector attempted to interrogate me, or the inspector's absent personality that seemed to drain the room for any emotions or feelings. That's correct, I replied, my wind pants making a swishy noise as I rested one leg on top of the other. Was there ever a time with all this money floating in and out of the warehouse that you or someone you worked with was tempted to dip into the pot? I couldn't help but laugh at the question. Is this really your approach? You're questioning to see if I'll admit that I was tempted to take money. I hope your other interrogations didn't come off that easy. I'm glad you find the humor in wasting your time and ours today, the inspector sneered. We're not here for your jokes, nor do I appreciate being asked about my tactics. I apologize, I said, trying to quiet my smile. I'm sure you know what you're doing. Please proceed. The next few questions went the same as the first. Had I witnessed anyone taking money? Had other people besides Jeff and me been allowed to touch the money? What did we do once we had the money? All the answers were met with the same response. We had a unit and an accountant to handle that part of the job, I said. Once the money was in our hands, it went straight into the safe. The only one to see it after that was the accountant. But surely, having access to that money every day, all day, made it hard for anyone to stay clean, even your outstanding unit. I could feel the dig as the last words weaseled their way through her teeth. Well, I'm sure you can see from my rich mansion on the hill, luxury cars, and private camps on the foothills of the Adirondacks that we were tempted every day. Mr. William, again, may I remind you that time is of essence. Let's move fast and stay away from the jokes, shall we? If you're implying that we don't have houses on the hill or luxury cars or camps, then I assume you looked into all of our household finances. I also assume that means you turned up nothing, because there is nothing. Not one of our hard-working members ever dipped their hands into the pot, as you say. You know why? Because all of us were hungry to nail the bad guys that came out every day. We didn't see money. We saw arrest. We saw power. We were high on the takedowns and adrenaline and hoped to nail the next big guy that came our way. Now, one man on this unit considered the financial aid papers they had to fill out for their child's college or second mortgage they had to take out on their houses because your employers would rather pay you top dollar and leave us men on the field with just enough money to take our family to Disneyland. Maybe we should have. Maybe thinking like that would have served our families, but I guess a unit as outstanding as ours wasn't that bright. The inspector sat back in the chair with a heavy sigh. She wasn't going to get anywhere, and she was disgusted. Here we were, a unit filled with degenerates that had been able to do something so profound, and yet she couldn't find a loophole. Because there isn't one to find, I said, hoping to end the conversation. There was nothing wicked or vindictive in anything we did, other than nail down the criminals and terrorists that you say no longer exist. What you're searching for isn't money. It's how we made the system work for the agents and not the state, who tries to make everything black and white. What we're searching for is $1.3 million. Mark my words, Mr. William, we'll find it. The days after the inspector's interrogation were dry, we all spent our time sitting in the Syracuse office waiting to hear anything. Yet day after day, no news arrived. The agency had a soft operation for you, Stanton muttered 2 weeks in our downtime. It's nothing big, but it's work. Stanton sounded as worn down as we felt. All this fighting, moving from warehouse to warehouse, operation after operation, to sitting stagnant behind the desk, waiting had settled into his bones. He was angry, and as I later learned, angry always makes you speak out of turn and makes decisions you may have otherwise thought unfit. It's a tax evasion case. Nothing major, but a lot is riding on it. Be thorough, precise, and get it done in a timely manner. Jeff couldn't be more excited about the task at hand. And to be frank, they could have offered me a job sorting through dog crap for a dime bag, and I would have taken it. I was desperate to get out of the office and back on the field. Yet, one day before assignment was to begin, Stanton made a decision. Tired and overwhelmed with the inspector's hold, Stanton took our criminal arrests, money brought to the state, and pages of facts to a journalist at the New York Post. His timing was spot on. As the day of his sit-down, the investigator launched a new development. Our unit sat there the next day, reading the headlines of the paper with our hearts in our throats. We were being replaced by a machine. The inspector hadn't even had the courtesy to tell us what we were being broken apart. But I suppose my lack of compliance had given her reason not to. I imagine the smile that spread across her face as she decided to announce our fate through the press. I imagine it was just as similar to Stan's smile the day he decided to do the same. With her head held high and the state police and governor behind her, the inspector proudly introduced a new coding software system that was designed to manage and improve the illegal sales of untaxed cigarettes and fraudulent tax stamps in New York State. The system was arbitrary, to say the least. Yet, when the headlines came in, the outsiders bought in. The inspector proposed to offset the costs of the highly expensive software by disbanding our unit. The software, she promised, would help to eliminate the sale of untaxed cigarettes for good. But Stanton and the rest of our disbanded unit knew better. No matter what technology they tried to develop, the bad guys would always catch up. There'd always be someone smarter and quicker, someone who'd take the inspectors a common goal and unravel it. With his loss of power, Stanton found a way to fight through the straitjacket that the inspector had put around us and went straight back to the journalists with another statement. Stanton spoke to the people about our $13 million revenue. He listed our closed cases, number of arrests, and asked the public to consider why a woman of this stature would want the state to disband something so profitable. Stanton used his anger to unleash powerful accusations, referring to the inspector as a sore loser since she'd fought to show criminal intent with our unit and had come up empty-handed. Stanton's facts and structured argument sent the inspector reeling the next morning. But his fight wouldn't stop there. The Albany Times-Union and other surrounding newspapers and press outlets, both small and wide, would print glowing articles, courtesy of Stanton, for the next 3 weeks. The powers that be couldn't do a thing about it either. For when they stormed into his office the morning of the first release, they found his letter of resignation, gun, and badge neatly placed on the cleared desk. Over the next few months, Stanton continued to expose our unit's skills and operations over the air and to any paper that would give him a slot. The inspector would go after him, slandering our team's name and the actions we took, but she could never clear Stanton's accusations. Not even when Stanton announced her candid statement about the downsizing of the terrorism in the United States 2 days after terrorists drove his car in a crowd of people in Times Square. Stanton, the founder of the PATB's largest arrest in history, continued his fight to clear our name, while the guys and I headed down to Fort Plain, ready to prove our unit's importance for the last time.
Making it through was a victory, but it came with a price. With trust broken and enemies multiplying, every step forward meant leaving something behind. But the real battles were just beginning. Stick around. The final chapters will be the most dangerous yet.